So, we are ready to start. And let's open our conversation. As we were discussing a moment ago, everything is now slowly coming together. And thanks to the wonderful question from our reporteritos from Chocó, the Vice President was able to tell us a few words about her work. And clearly, she discussed the issue of investment in Afro-descendant territories in Colombia, because we know that without investment there can be no development, and inequality will only last for longer. Therefore, it's really important for us now to focus on a conversation that will invite us to reflect on the support to Afro-descendant businesses through investment from the diaspora. For this topic, I'd like to introduce you to the different panelists. Let me introduce first Tainisha Boye Robinson. She's the president and CEO of Cape Ec, a partner of the Global Black Economic Forum, as well as Erica Seth Davis, Chief Executive Officer at RIA Ventures. John Burns, the co-founder of the Burns Brothers. On stage as well, Leodani Parra Andrade, who is a business owner of West Valley Logistics, and she is a beneficiary of the She Exports to Africa program, supported by the Office of the Vice President of the Republic of Colombia. And lastly, Mr. Luc Gérard Niafe, a Colombo-Congolese business owner, founder of Tribeca Asset Management, and main shareholder or main partner of the Estrategos Group. And to open this panel in a few words, so that our panelists may kick off their thoughts, I will invite Alfonso David, CEO and President and CEO of the GBEF. Welcome.
You have businesses that operate all over the globe. You have businesses that focus on investments here in Colombia, businesses that focus on investments in the United States, businesses that focus on investments on the continent of Africa. And the purpose of this conversation, which is going to be moderated by the fantastic Ty Boye Robinson, the purpose of this conversation is to identify the ways in which we can invest in our different communities. You have 5 people on stage that look at the issues of investment through very different lenses, but they all have the same goal. And the goal is, how do we cross-invest into our communities? And we couldn't be more grateful for them taking out their time and sharing their expertise with us. With that, I will turn it over to Ty Boye Robinson, who is the head of CAP-EQ and also is connected to PAP to 1555, and she's going to moderate this conversation. Ty?
Muchas gracias, Alfonso. Mi español.
Thank you very much, Alfonso. My Spanish is not very good. I speak a little bit. My name is Tainisha Boye, but they call me Ty. I'm here with my children, and they think that your country is really beautiful and that your food is delicious. We are part of the African heritage, which is why I'm so proud to participate in this event. Now I will switch to English.
People, as we discussed. And so I really want us to start with understanding a little bit about each of their businesses and their business model. We will empezamos con Leo, después Luke, then Erica and John. Leo.
Buenas tardes para todos.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure for me to be here with you as we commemorate the Day of Afro-Colombian Identity to discuss not only culture, but really important topics such as our economies and that of women of African descent, who have been really struggling for a long time to open a space for ourselves in this country while contributing to the development of our territories. I am one of the founders of West Valley Logistics, which is a cosmetics laboratory based here in the city of Cali. We are 3 sisters coming from the Chocó region on the Colombian Pacific. We're very proud of our origins and territory. And we knew a lot about the different produce that grow on our territory, but often we failed to add value to them through transformation. So we started with a specific palm tree called mil peso, which has been traditionally used thanks to its properties that help skin care and hair care. Now, I'm not specialized in chemistry or pharmacy myself. I'm an economist by training, and we started looking for people who did know. We started, but it was not easy, of course. We faced many different hurdles on the way on topics such as financial education. You know, I'm a trained economist, but many people in our community don't know much about these kind of skills, and we've had to face many different kinds of hurdles, such as investment, among others. And sometimes just things take a lot of time for lack of information, but we've been able to push the creation of our company. Many people have helped us on different topics. And so about the company itself, we are a cosmetic laboratory. We produce hair care and skin care products. They're products that are duly registered with the health and sanitary authorities in Colombia. And we also are currently applying for a certification that would give us an environmental certification that would make our product more attractive. We're investing in more production facilities so that we can speed up our production, but you know, there are so many hurdles on the way. Not only do we produce our own products, we also help other entrepreneurs who wish to produce and bottle their own products under their own brands, and they can use our factory for that. So they're entrepreneurs who receive from us technical advice if they wish to produce in small batches, because they're maybe starting their businesses, and we try to support them on the production front. So that's basically just a few words to start about my company. Thank you. Luc. Okay, let me start by running a small survey. You know, it's right after lunch, everyone's a little tired, the vice president is writing and staying awake. When we talk about everything Afro-diasporic, we're thinking about what we're seeing there, you know, biche, sweets, like small scale and family run businesses. But I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions. Does anyone know EMI, the ambulance company? Okay, well, EMI in Colombia has about 7,000 employees and 1,400 ambulance cars. Does anyone know about the Bogota Beer Company? right? Many people. Bogota Beer Company has 85 pubs and 1,400 employees. Anyone has heard of Easy Fly, the airline? You know, Easy Fly to Quibdó. Easy Fly now has 27 planes and almost 2,000 or 3,000 employees. Have you heard Onda de Mar? You know, a swimwear brand. Well, they have 85 stores all around the world, 40 in Colombia and more outside of Colombia. And maybe other less known companies, one called TPL, Thermo Power Limited. This company generates a fifth of Colombia's electricity, and 85% of the energy of the Atlantic coast is generated by TPL. And lastly, if you went to Bogota, you probably saw the cargo terminal at the Bogota airport. It's the largest in Latin America and the third one in the world for the transport of refrigerated goods. So these are all large businesses, and they generate over 27,000 direct employments in Colombia and affects over 60,000 families indirectly. Well, few people know that the main partner in all those businesses is a black man, myself. And so, what's the challenge? Well, I'd love not to be the only one in this club. I'd love to see so many more Afros in this club. And to this end, we have to find a formula that could allow us to jump from micro entrepreneurships, micro businesses, which are really small scale companies that basically come to generate 1 or 2 monthly incomes, to companies that generate far more wealth on a far wider scale. Thank you. I'll tell you all about this later.
This afternoon. Buenas tardes. My name is Erica Seth Davies. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I'm based in Baltimore, Maryland, and I'm CEO of RIA Ventures, which is a social enterprise that uses capital to advance reproductive and maternal health equity for women. The work that we do is always looking at the ways in which we can either direct capital or influence decision-making and behavior through use of capital to center the voices, the experiences, the ingenuity, and the innovation of women of color and other groups in the United States that have been marginalized from access, from affordability, from quality health care, and the products and the innovations that can advance our health. So we do that in a number of ways. We call it systems change. So what are the policies? What are the practices? What are the things that we have normed in terms of that decision making that have to change in order for every woman and birthing person to have opportunity to optimize their health? We do that through directing capital through a venture fund with over 20 dedicated companies, and we do actually have the largest dedicated women's health portfolio in the world with a, thank you, with the fund size. With the fund size of $38.5 million, which is considered a micro fund, but even still we do mighty things, punch above our weight, and have significant impact. And all of our decisions happen through an impact first lens because the nonprofit owns the venture fund. And so that's the type of work that we do. And then we work with investors to get them on the right side so that their decision making is actually having the impact that we know can happen when you're more intentional about those companies that you choose, the ways that you support those companies, and the ways in which we bring more investors to the table where we're centering mission and not merely profit.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Burns. I am the owner and founder of a company in the United States called the Burns Brothers. which is more of a holding company. I have 6 businesses that ladder up to that large organization. So I have a hospitality company, I own restaurants and private membership clubs. I also have a pretty large event production company. We produce concerts, award shows. We produced all the events at the White House for President Biden over his 4 years in the White House. We have a marketing company, but also I think the most pertinent thing to this conversation is our work in Africa. We're partners in a large call center BPO company called CCI Global, and we're actually the largest private employer in Africa. So I have 26,000 employees across 6 countries. And so I'm in Egypt, I'm in Rwanda, I'm in Ghana, I'm in Ethiopia, South Africa, and Kenya. And all of what we do is about jobs and providing opportunities for this amazing talent across the continent of Africa. And I think as we talk about these conversations, my brother and I live by the philosophy, it's called a double bottom line. You can do good and do well. And so when we think about enterprising, you also can be impactful. And so I want this whole day, and I think obviously as we think through the conversations already taking place, it's about those 2 principal things. How can you be enterprise and be impactful? And I think that's kind of the genesis of what we're going into with this conversation as well. But thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you, John. What John forgot to say is after today, he's going to have several businesses in Colombia as well.
There you go.
So I want to get into some of the details that we heard today. And let's start with you, Erica. I would love for you to share the opportunity that you see about investing globally in women's health, particularly the diaspora.
Oh, most certainly. So there was a recent study that found that, and I wanted to make sure I got this right, so I wrote it down, that there's a significant women's health gap, and it correlates with women living in poor health for 25% more of their lives than men do. So not only do we live longer in actually poorer health. But closing that gap could yield 75 million disability-adjusted life years annually, which equates to about 7 healthy days per year per woman on the globe. It also has the potential to unlock $1 trillion in annual global GDP by 2040 if addressed. Think about that. Focusing in on our health intentionally, we're actually globally over half the population. We birth 100% of the population, but our health has received the least attention, the least research, the least innovation, the least investment when we talk about the health landscape. And if we change that, if we are intentional about not only investing in women who are bringing forward the solutions for their own health challenges, but when we make sure that women's health is prioritized as a matter of quality of life, as well as a matter of economic growth, that we can actually see an amazing opportunity realized in a relatively short amount of time.
Thank you, Erica. I want to take what Erica was saying and build off of your work, Leo. So you have been working in so many ways for the empowerment of women. I'd love for you to share, one, the importance of financial education with the empowerment of women, but two, your role and the reason why collaboration has been so critical to your model.
Bueno,
Well, financial education is a must. It is really a tool that is so fundamental for the empowerment of women and their economic autonomy. Because through economic empowerment, we can have access to information and knowledge so that we may manage that in an efficient way. Not only our own funds, but also those of our families and relatives. In our lab, we empower women by advising them not only on aspects directly related to the production of cosmetics, but also in the organization of their own business models. Our group is experienced in different fields such as international trade, the economy, the environment, and we can provide them support so that they may reach their goals as planned.
Back to you, John. So given the fact that you've had such amazing rapid growth in the continent, what kind of support, either from the private or public sector, would it take for you to be able to expand in the diaspora overall, and of course the next país being Colombia?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and thank you for that. So I think everything starts with partnership, and collaboration and conversation, right? And so I think forums like this are so vitally important because it starts the groundwork and the groundswell to that relationship to grow. And so for us, when we think about capital, we think about kind of extending, we think about scale, we also think about how we can do it in a strategic way that actually impacts those communities as well, too. And so it's having conversations with the vice presidents, having conversations with other people about their needs, because you never want to come in and just take, you want to come in and add value. And so what is the need in the specific region of the world that you're trying to go into, and how can you actually add value as opposed to extract value? For us, what we see in Africa, there's tons of talented young people, but opportunity never goes there. And so how, through some of our relationships, can we talk to Western corporations to hopefully incentivize them to come to Africa? How can we talk to Western corporations and incentivize them to come to South America and Latin America? So I think it's also, and Alfonso was saying this earlier, how do you break the bias? And the way you break the bias is by education and exposure. And so again, you cannot overstate the importance of the fundamental purpose of bringing people together is not only to fellowship, but it's also to create, to come up with ideas and partnerships and how to move things forward. And so for us, scale is about impact, but scale is also about understanding the needs of where we're going to next, and obviously making sure we're adding value, not just extracting value.
Thank you, John. So I want to go back to both Luke and Leo and ask you, given the fact that you are here and you've been successful, how do we come up with more Lukes and more Leos across Colombia? So what kind of policies or processes would you recommend the magnificent Vice Presidente that you would need to thrive? And I want to start with you, Luke, and then go to Leo.
Gracias.
Thank you. Well, as opposed to a very common idea that people say that you need resources because there's no money and what have you, I don't really share this point of view. I think, I don't know, there are 100 or 200 of us. If I give $1 million to each one of us, you'll probably be, bankrupt in one year. And then this is a reality. Maybe you in 3 months. With those very expensive glasses. Let me explain. What we lack in the world is not money. There is an excess of liquidity in the world right now. What we lack is work methodology to grow from the single family household company to a company that has a life of its own. I dedicated a lot of time understanding this because this issue can be found here, but in Africa as well. So what makes the women who are here successful, and what drives the success of people who have small companies? Well, it's themselves, It's themselves who work, and if I work 8 hours a day, well, then everything will be fine. But if I work 12 hours a day, it will be even better, and even better if I work on weekends. But it's only me. I'm a one-man company. When I start delegating this to my daughter or my niece, well, the productivity starts dropping, and you cannot reproduce the success model. And the reason is because this experience is not systematized. Most of those small-scale company, and I'm sure we could carry out a survey. Someone mentioned biche, for example. Biche is something that we know how to do. We don't need the certification from health authorities, but you'd be surprised to know that in so many of these companies, the people that produce biche don't have a written recipe. They have their recipe in their mind. They know how to do it, but there's no formalization. It's not written so that anyone can do that. The same thing happens with cooking. Same thing happens with so many things. So the main hurdle to grow from a one-man company to a company that generates wealth for a whole community and that may be replicated is making sure that the driver of the company, which is the entrepreneur itself, could support growth. But if without that person the company cannot possibly work or grow, then in this case, this company cannot possibly grow, of course. And if it cannot grow, it cannot attract money, because an investor is not interested in investing in a small business that exclusively depends on one person. So it's really key that when the vice president launches her idea, does not only focus on how to attract resources for people. I know it's very tempting to say that we need money, but at the end of the day, it's not about the money. There is money out there. What you need is incubators, for example, training centers where you will help entrepreneurs filtering, improving their internal processes so that they could perhaps only dedicate 20% of their time to production for 80% impact. What are the many things I do that perhaps are useless? A friend of mine has a restaurant. He was a candidate in MasterChef, and he became a little well known, and his restaurant was working really well. And I asked him, why don't you have 2 restaurants? And he said, well, no, I tried, but whenever I open a second restaurant, the second one doesn't work. And I asked, why? And I watched him. He's the first there in the restaurant in the morning, looking at how the tables are set. He comes and goes into the kitchen. He speaks to all of the waiters, fix that shirt, fix that apron, do this, do that. So clearly, when he opens a second restaurant, as soon as he leaves one restaurant to work in the other, the performance of the second one starts dropping. And if he is not able to open 2 or 3 restaurants, an investor like me will never be interested in investing in this business, because I will say, well, look, this is your restaurant. There's no space for me here as an investor. And clearly, this is the case in many, many of the poorest departments in this country, which is why we need incubators where entrepreneurs can come and receive help and advice in a place where they can be supported in their processes, where there could be someone such as me or anyone here on the panel who could sit down with them and say, look, stop doing this, stop doing that. I'm just going to give my colleagues the floor, sorry, but I just wanted to give you the example of a company that sells hundreds of thousands of dollars in beer. It's a company that existed that was created in 2018. The company is not really much of a success, but they have an excellent beer. I asked them, how many beers do you have? And they said, well, we have 40 different beers. And I said, why? Well, because, there's these people over there, they like lager, and they like amber, and they like such and such ale with more or less sugar. So they have a small production plant, but they are dividing their efforts up in so many different segments. So I told them, choose one brand, choose one segment, and focus on those segments until you really multiply your income. But this is difficult, right? Because this guy loved producing his 40 kinds of beers, just like many entrepreneurs love just attending people with their product. But this is the danger. You must know what to choose and what to do and what to not do in order to attract investment.
Bueno,
After listening to my colleague here, you realize that I still have a lot to learn, and hence the importance of having access or mentorship from people who have been down that road before and who could make it less difficult to reach our goals, because you oftentimes have to learn and then unlearn. But when you have a mentor, you can say, okay, here we are as Afro-descendants, as members of the African diaspora. So there's huge wealth, not just economic wealth, but quality wealth. Lots of people have really important experience and knowledge. So it's really important that we can access it and have mentors or people who lead the way for us, because oftentimes you don't have a precise diagnosis. Sometimes they'll provide the capital, but they won't accompany you. Sometimes when it comes to investing, there's no money to invest, so it becomes quite difficult sometimes. And I would like it if we could get some ideas out of this to help us as small entrepreneurs who are growing. So people who are farther ahead from us, who have lots of experience and who have also advised many companies, can also mentor us and follow up on our processes so we can improve our companies. Thank you, Leo.
My fellow panelists here, but first I just want to share a little bit about our experience in the United States. My organization, Path to 1555, is there to fuel Black business growth. And one of the things that we often see in the United States is that when we don't get access to capital, somehow it's our fault. When we are not in the room, sometimes it's because we weren't working hard enough. And when you look at the data, what we often see is that you have multiple people who are from the diaspora who have the same credentials as their peers, but it takes them twice as long to raise a quarter of the money. And you see that across the venture capital space. You see that across the debt space. Often, also, you see that people of color do not have the same wealth as their peers, so therefore they don't get angel money. And one of the things we need to make sure is that it's a both and. What we're trying to solve for, at least in the United States, is yes, let's mentor, yes, let's support others around us, but also let's address the structural barriers, whether it's a capital P policy or lowercase p policy, of the businesses and partners we have that actually keep us from growing. So I just wanted to share that. I don't know Colombia as much as you do, but I know those barriers in our country, and I thought it might be helpful to not just share what works, but also share the struggles and the fights that we're working to overcome ourselves still to this day. So based on that, I'd love to hear from both you, John and Erica, on some promising practices that you've seen that actually address the structural barriers, whether it's in the United States or globally for the diaspora. And I'll start with you, Erica, because I know this is your jam.
So one of the things that we do at RIA is try to change the conditions for capital. So in the women's health space, all the new funds that are being stood up are, well, I shouldn't say all, but most are by first-time fund managers who are also women. There are women of color also who are doing this, and we face structural barriers in accessing capital. So one of those is the simple due diligence process, right? So when we get in front of investors, or when a company comes to an investor, or when a fund manager goes to an investor to develop their fund, the diligence process has been designed, and it benefits white men as capital owners, and it doesn't account for the structural barriers that everyone else is facing. And so we do what we can to change the environment in which people have to raise capital by providing alternative approaches to doing that work. It is not less rigorous. I would argue it is more rigorous. It is not going to increase risk. I would actually argue it mitigates risk, because now you're taking into account the things that actually create those barriers to success. So that's one of the ways that we try to solve the problem that we actually encountered when going to the market to try to raise capital from investors who would say things like, women's health is a niche market. I'm gonna go back to where I started with 50% of the population and 100% of birthing the population is not a niche market. It is only unfamiliar to you if you've not cared about it enough. And so we've had to actually start to design the pathways for our own work and our own ecosystem. And that's one of the things that I think is global, right? That is something that we all are dealing with. I think the other is designing for our experience. So in the United States, and I'm sure here, we have learned there's something called weathering that affects Black women in particular. But when you have social determinants of your health that actually create challenges, your health is obviously impacted by it. That has to be accounted for in the design of innovation. and actually valued by the investors that are going to invest. And so I think values alignment is so important with respect to the ecosystems that we build around these opportunities. So making sure that people who care about doing well and doing good are the people who are giving you the advice, right? Not just people for whom extraction is the only way that they know how to interact with opportunities. And so as you all continue to build relationship across the diaspora and even building the structures within, that often gets overlooked, that sometimes we end up in, operating at cross purposes with someone who has the very resources that we need. And I've seen over and over again what that looks like. The pain, the heartache of a founder who loses their company because they took the wrong money when they should have just paused and be like, maybe I have to slow. Maybe I need to go find the incubator that's actually going to help me build, as opposed to just taking the capital, getting an advisor, and the next thing, I've lost everything. And so being intentional about learning from the lessons, but also building what works for you and making sure that there's participatory design, that the people who are receiving the innovation, the folks who are building the businesses, the folks who are going to be doing the investment as well, that all of us are part of that design process. I can't design from the United States for Colombia, right? That has to be done here by Colombian women on the ground. And so anything I can offer, I'd offer, but it's your work, your narrative, your innovation, your ingenuity. All of those things have to be supported and surrounded by the strategies that we may offer.
Yeah, no, round of applause. No, I absolutely love that, because I couldn't agree more. And what I've learned in business over the last 2 decades is, if you're in a position to influence decision making and decision makers, you have to use your power wisely. And so I think the genesis of this conversation is, how can people who have influence ultimately effectuate change? And so in business, we always use the term leverage, right? Because you're always trying to get leverage in any business deal. And so once you get to a point of influence, it is incumbent upon you to help change the circumstances for people behind you, change the policies, effectuate some of the changes around funding and capital raising, all that stuff. We see the same issues in Africa. We see the same issues in the United States. We see the same issues in Latin America. This is not new. We've seen this for a long, long time. And the only way change really happens is using your power for good and actually being the squeaky wheel. Oftentimes, I see when people get to a certain elk in their business, oftentimes they forget the struggle to get to that point. So how can you, in that position of influence, remember what you had to go through to get to that point and ensure that the struggle is less for people coming behind you? And I think my brother and I, we live that mantra every single day. And it's something that really matters to us, because we understood the struggle. We understand what it means to grow a global business. And it's not easy, right? And the challenges and the hurdles were a lot of things that we're talking about. It was funding, it was capital, it was people not believing in us because we had to show them 20 times more than our majority colleague. And so I think, again, as we continue, and I say we, the collective we, the global we, continue to elevate, remember that the elevation requires accountability, and the elevation requires to make sure that people who are coming behind you have it a lot easier than we had it. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Thank you, John. Oh, I could talk to them forever, but I'm getting the hook. So I'm going to have everybody close it out with 1 minute, un minuto, no más, a closing inspirational piece about what does it mean to you for us to somos herencia africana? What does it mean to you for us to all be part of this global diaspora in a way that's driving economic justice? So we'll start with John and go all the way to Leo.
Well, first of all, thank you, Vice President. Thank you, Alfonso. Thank you all for inviting me to participate. I love being parts of conversations like this, because I think, again, this is where change happens. This is where the momentum is built. This is where the groundswell of support and collaboration begins, and we can change the world collectively together. And so if I were to share kind of one departing thought, is there's power in the collective. This is a powerful, powerful room of leaders, of influential people that want to do good and do well. And if you live by the core principle that it's not always about being enterprising, but it's also how do you collectively be impactful, your life will change. move at that level of framework in your mind, and it's changed my life. Because I'm a businessman at my core, but I'm a civil rights activist at my core too, and I think you can be both. They're not mutually exclusive. So I would always encourage people to move with an enterprising and impactful mindset. But thank you all again.
Also, thank you. I'm deeply appreciative, almost near tears by the beauty of the conversation, the people in the room, and the knowledge that there are folks that are advocating all over the world for me. Y'all don't know me, but I know that because of this, you're advocating for me that this work is successful and that's meaningful. I think the one thing is that we are at an inflection point and have so much opportunity. To be able to build from the ground up what works for this community, this country, this economy is profound. And given what's happening in the world right now, it may as well be us because we know we'll do it better. And so I think that's what gives me hope. That's what I am looking forward to being a part of. And again, just grateful to have been invited. So thank you, Alfonso. Thank you, Ty. Thank you, Vice President, for having us. And we're in line behind you.
Thank you. Gracias.
I would like to thank Madam Vice President for this initiative and remind you all that over centuries, one of the weaknesses of our community was making decisions against our interests. We voted for people who then wouldn't be accountable towards us, and then we vote for them again. We want to go into businesses, but we don't prefer our businesses. So this is something that's characteristic that we have learned over centuries of dominion, but we must fight against them in the sense that we must be solidary. As you see in other communities, if I'm facing a situation, I will prioritize my own things, and that's not going against others. That just means that if I prefer my own things, I support my own things, so it works. So to help those people, for them to be better, this is something that's still not too deep. It's in our speech. We call one another brother, sister, brotherhood, sisterhood, and all of that. But 95% of cases, this isn't real. In 95% of cases, this is not real. And I go back to the $1 million lady and I remind her, imagine all of the football, soccer players and the athletes, all the money they've earned, and how many of them ended up being poor because money is education. The case of people who come from wealth, it's not so much the money they're given, it's the notion of money, the concept of money. Money won't burn their fingers, so to speak. There's a father or someone telling them, look out, don't buy this car because you still haven't done this. Buy a home first, or buy this other thing first. Create jobs. This advice that we haven't received from history, because 95% of people here in this room are part of the 1% of the wealthiest people in Colombia. You don't feel that way. At least most people don't feel that way. But when you know what you must have, I think it's $30,000 a year as an income to be part of the wealthiest 1% in the world, you realize that all of the people here are quite privileged. You don't feel that way, but you are. So what do you do with this privilege? You believe that someone has to do this or someone has to help, but that someone is us. So being accountable, being responsible for this is important, and please focusing on methodology and not on resources that much. If you go to a party or a dinner, people who come to you, in my particular case, who tell me, I have to tell you about a business idea. It happens all the time. People have a business idea, but a business idea is easy to have. What's hard is having a business. It's like people who say, I want to learn English this year. Are you taking English lessons? No, not yet. I want to learn about computers. Are you taking lessons? No, but I will do it. So being prone to going from the desire to the action is what makes winners. That's what people who succeed do. What you have to do is help Others, when they start getting tired, you tell them, no, remember, let's go to class today, let's do it. Encourage them, and that's the sense of solidarity that Mr. Burns was talking about that could help us progress. Thank you so much. I would like to thank the Vice President first for having me in this event. And I would like to thank all the organizations that made this possible and every one of you that attended today, because this allows us to grow as an Afro-descending community. Of all that's been spoken, seeing the topic of importance and incidence, we can see that it's extremely important to have financial education, because it's not about having the resources or getting them, but what do you do with it? How are you going to use it so our companies can grow? Also, having access to knowledge, economic autonomy for each one of us is key to make conscious decisions and have access to a better future, both as Afro-descendants and as people, to try to get each one of our companies to succeed. This is not easy because we face many barriers every day, but along the way you learn and you find people who will give you advice if they've done this before you. And I also want to truly thank the fund, because through it we were able to grow a bit. We're still missing so many things, but we are working to perfect them and have this company succeed. It hasn't been easy, but we're on it. Thank you so much.
I will close this out and say what is giving me hope for economic justice, those reportitos, the strength of their voices, but not just that, the example that they see in the vice president, the example my children get to see in the vice president. It's not just that she looks like them, but that she is showing that leadership means fighting for economic justice, even at times at the safety of herself and her own family. And what that means for economic opportunity globally is that family is defined not just by the people by blood, but family is defined by all of us in the diaspora. Gracias por la oportunidad, Vice President.
Thank you for the opportunity, Madam Vice President.
Despidamos por favor a nuestros y nuestras panelistas con
Let's give a strong round of applause to our panelists. What a powerful panel we just saw. Absolutely, let's keep this moment in our memories. I'm not sure if you were, but I was writing down everything because it's important for us to go back on what our panelists have said. We have been through a day that has definitely provided the tone, has set the tone through which we're building the conversation of economic justice for communities and people of African descent. And it's definitely important and interesting to highlight some of the things that our panelists have left for us over the day. I would like to greet the people who are connected with us watching this economic justice forum for Afro-descending people through the different platforms of the Vice Presidency of the Republic. Remember, you can interact with us through the hashtag Somos Herencia Africana. We are African heritage. We can read you with that hashtag through our social media accounts, and of course your opinions will be taken into account. 20% action, 80% productivity. How can we accomplish this? It's part of the reflections that we build through experience exchange, the power of collectivity, something really interesting mentioned in this panel that starts a conversation that we have been knitting from the very first hours of the morning.
Vamos a continuar con nuestra agenda, no sin antes, por supuesto, elevar el fraterno.
Let's go on by greeting our ambassador Charomina, who's now joining this conversation within the 21st of May, a really important day for communities and people of African descent, 174 years since the legal abolition of slavery in our country. And these are conversations that have to do with our historic responsibility and our time. We're talking about economic justice, how can we materialize it with examples that the diaspora is providing along the world, but how can we dialogue with the diaspora that's performing so many actions around the world where, well, these dialogues are coming into action today. We have talked about companies and investment, and now it's time to talk about something really important for us: culture. What happens to art? What happens to music? What happens to cultural industries to materialize economic justice for our communities? That's part of what we'll talk about over our next panel.
Ya mismo, pero por supuesto. Sí. Pero ya tienen que estar acá. O sea, yo los presento acá.
Tú los nombraste y nadie sabía quién era. Porque no se pararon así.
Ya.
Entonces le dices que los nombres.
Y que suman.
Porque
Bueno.
si tú se.
O lo que podemos hacer es que estén. Lo maravilloso de estos espacios es que siempre nos permiten conectar.
The great thing about these events is being able to connect. Sometimes there's too much going on, and the diaspora is talking from different points of view, and men and women who are working to make the consolidation of the African diaspora visible are all over the place. We just saw a crowd here, and what's going on is that we have a delegation from South Africa that's participating in the regional exchange of experiences, learned about this event and came to greet us. So we would like to welcome them because they're joining this wonderful conversation that will surely have to do with the process they're developing. So welcome and thank you for being here.
Vamos entonces a dar paso a nuestro siguiente.
Let's move on to our next panel. There was an announcement, but it wasn't necessary to do so because it was resolved. Let's go then to our next panel. Let's talk about cultural industries as the engine for economic development for Afro-descending communities. I would like to ask Alfonso David to join me on the stage, President and CEO of the Global Black Economic Forum. I would also like to invite to the stage Kim Haas, producer and host of Afro-Latino Travels on PBS. I would also like to invite to join this panel David Romuald, Executive Director of the Wancom Group from Rolling Stone Africa. we also invite to this panel the Secretary of Culture of Santiago de Cali, Lady Johanna Egidio Henao. Visions, points of view from this conversation will be complemented by Mike Sale, an artist, musician, and researcher of the rhythms and sounds that connect us to our roots. And our panel will be completed by singer, songwriter, arranger, saxophonist, marimba musician, musical director, and researcher Hugo Candelario Gonzalez. This conversation couldn't occur without someone who's an expert at articulating, at bringing this together, and recognizing skills in others to potentialize them. So let's give a round of applause to Vicenta Morena Hurtado, our moderator, Director of Regional Promotion from the Ministry of Cultures, Arts and Knowledge, and also social leader advocating for the rights of Afro-descending communities. I would like to start by thanking everyone for this important conversation, for our African descent, our black communities. The next panel will discuss the role of cultural industries as an engine for economic development for Afro-descending communities. I have been listening to all the conversations since the morning, and I'm truly impacted by everything that's coming up, but also how we can connect and embrace one another so the progress of one becomes the progress of all of us, so we can all drive one another and get together in this chain to collectively construct as Afro-descending peoples. We're all aware that arts and culture have been the engine of resistance and re-existence of our black Afro-descending communities in societies where we haven't been given room, where we permanently fighting for life, for our own position as people, as human beings. So arts and culture have been there building freedom roads. Yet we're also aware that our artists usually die without a possibility for a meaningful life. So that's also the challenge we have, the challenge of having cultural industries enabling this economic strengthening of our people without having to remove their identity or their constructions. Here in the panel, as our host mentioned, we have really important representatives who have been part of all the cultural trajectory and with whom we want to talk. So we'll talk based on one question, which is how can we move forward in developing economic autonomy for Afro-descending society, communities and people through arts, music, film, and cultural industries in general. How can we move this forward? I know you also have great experience on this field. Let's start with the Secretary of Culture of Cali, Lady Ihiro, who could perhaps answer this question.
Aló. Hola, muy buenas tardes para todos y todas. Buenas tardes, vicepresidenta. Estamos acá.
Good afternoon, everyone. Madam Vice President, we are in a really interesting conversation here. I was talking to Mike. I've been talking about cultural creative industries for about 20 years. I'm an economist, and someone asked me today that as a Secretary of Culture, what was my degree, and I said I'm an economist, and this was like really weird because everyone's like, what are you doing there? But what I can say is that there are two relevant topics around it. First, thinking about arts and culture has always been something like that complements, that's not essential, but only a few years ago we have identified, or people have started identifying, that this is the base to talk about social and economic development. Secondly, understanding that we must be self-sustainable in different ways. This is something really interesting from the recent conversations, because I believe our international guests have heard a bit about our great festival Petronio Alvarez with free access, but things aren't really free. Someone has to pay for them, right? So they say, oh, we should charge something for entrance to the festival, but you say there's also a topic of access to cultural rights, and how can we define those models? So you start reviewing, and in 2025 we're talking about collective rights. And in the previous panel I found it really interesting to hear how when we are a collective, it's much easier to create the desired environment for this to work. Sometimes it happens even in exercises within these dynamics. During this festival we make calls for people to present so we can maintain tradition. We talk about carriers of tradition. So this becomes a really attractive festival because we have handcrafts, fashion, food, for those of you who don't know about it. But it's also economic, but it's good for this very few that can access, because there are space limitations. But we have wanted that the city to also connect. We have zone festivals in the 4 departments of the Colombian Pacific, and these zone competitions become tourism attractions. So we're linking processes that have to do not just with cultural entrepreneurship, but with cultural companies and with cultural industries. When you see the magic of the traditional cooking, but also the flavor of dancing and everything that has to do with arts, culture, and creativity, you start to think, what's going on if you have brands such as Peru? When you think of Peru, you think of delicious food, but this is a whole country. What happens to the Colombian Pacific? Maybe 10 years ago we had the opportunity, I believe with Hugo, and you were there too, Mike, with Colombia is Pacific at Washington, and we had the chance to say Colombia also has a zone and an area that's called the Pacific, and it's not just Cumbia and the northern region. This was really interesting because at first they heard it and it was like, no, this is not Colombia. And sometimes, as Master Nidia was saying, she has to explain that she's from Colombia. So after 5 songs, people connected. But we had the need to present the culture of one of the territories in Colombia, and how we can open doors for people to come. In the last year competitions, it was really clear that most of what's being proposed in a festival such as Petronio is not just the stage. It's putting lives on a stage. It's tradition that happens every day by carriers of this tradition. And every time we hear it or we feel it, we get goosebumps because it's those lives that are there. This is very meaningful for cultural industries without losing the essence of culture. Now, we're not saying that we have to monetize everything, and just as they're saying we should charge for Petronio and monetize everything, I believe it's ideal not to lose your essence, but also being aware that you can create opportunities for income. It also happened during the Festival of Classical Music. Our maestros here, we were able to include a beautiful gospel work, and we had the chance at the municipal theater to have the opportunity to feel, to listen to so much talent and art. And we said, okay, we're ready. I'm not sure how many artists do we have on stage with that. We have 50 performers, 50 artists, and we can go out with such amazing talent. So how are we capable to organize ourselves and understand and believe in ourselves that we have an opportunity both to show our culture as to creating that income and opportunities for these people? I have been in different places doing this work, but every time I had the chance to think, if this were in Cali or if I were in the Pacific, I would do this and that. And well, now I'm at the Secretary of Culture. Time goes by faster than you expect, but we're trying to foster these conditions from the collective and from believing in what we have. I believe that regarding the question, these are the points. How do we believe in it? How do we strengthen it with joint work? And how do we understand that the opportunity for festivals and fairs, it's not just 3 or 5 days, but year-long processes where we're all contributing to have something really solid, as one of the panelists mentioned in the previous panel. So this is my perspective within what I can see from my expertise with cultural and creative industries.
Thank you very much, lady. The question is really also about us as members of state institutions. What are our options to strengthen cultural industries? What can we do to support the development and the economic development of our people and of our artists? Yeah, sure. Just about that very briefly. What we've been doing is creating a series of round tables in order to understand the needs and the situation. How can a public body like us can help bridge gaps in the market? How can we invest public funding in, say, a communication strategy, because there's no money to pay for it otherwise. This is money that should come from the mayor's office or the Ministry of Culture. And it's quite easy to say, well, we need more communications, more marketing, but we still lack money for that. And we were hearing about tourism, of course, and everything that you do with tourism for Afro-Latino travels. And clearly the issue of tourism is really quite something. Bolero is part of the intangible world heritage. Salsa, not yet, but still it's something that connects us to humanity. And so if we can keep working to achieve salsa to be declared intangible world heritage, then it will be a massive platform for connection, because salsa can be found in so many regions of the Caribbean basin. So culture is a means of communicating. We know that arts and culture should not only depend on public funding and grants, it should also be sustained by just circulation that is also a source of interest for the private sector. It should be profitable, and companies should be able to support arts and creativity and see benefits in it. Great. Thank you very much. Let's give the floor to Hugo Candelario, and then we will continue with the other guest on stage. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hugo Candelario Gonzalez. I am a musician from Guapi, Cauca. My name is Hugo Candelario because I was born in a fire that burned most of the village. And I was taken to the hospital with my mother, who had been injured, and the guy who drove the boat was Gualajo, a very, very important marimba master. And this really marked my mind and my career forever, and this is how I learned from my elders. So my whole life, since pretty much my birth, has been built around music in connection with the elders, and at some stage I was lucky enough to study music to complement the traditional knowledge that had been taught to me by masters of the Pacific with the formal Western school. A music school, the Popular Culture Institute of Cali, the music program at the University of Valle del Cauca here in Cali. And why am I saying that? Well, because I want to be very clear about the importance of education in our region. As it has been said in the previous panel, we did talk about not only extracting but also helping regions grow, right? So education, culture, the systematization of knowledge, as it was said in the previous panel, is really important. So that experience that I've had, which is really composed of the traditional aspect and then the educational, formal Western aspect, so to speak, were really the drivers behind the development of my career. And when I started this process, the risk for musicians from the South Pacific was for tradition to be lost, because there was a big gap between the young and the elders. But with the Petronio Alvarez Pacific Music Festivals, groups such as Grupo Bahía, Herencia, things have changed, and now there are many young people who have learned to play traditional instruments and music. So there is now a new generation, but the risk now is that the knowledge of the elders dies with them. So I put together an initiative, and thanks to my friend Francia Marquez, as vice president, she put me in touch with the Ministry of Culture, and we have launched a project that has just been created. It's called the Community of Water, which is about recording the knowledge and the music of all the elders, recording their teachings so that when they leave us, their knowledge does not disappear with them. And it's not only about the music, I'm talking about traditional knowledge as a whole. This knowledge is the bedrock of our musical education, and we cannot lose it. So I would like to invite you to visit the website of La Comunidad del Agua, the Community of Water. I traveled, to Cuba, Brazil, Venezuela, Panama, and I found out that there are many music schools there, and I found out that yes, we do have a lot of talent here, but we don't have a school, a formal music school. so that, we could maybe compete appropriately with the Caribbean, who is probably 100 years ahead of us in technology, musical education, and even academia in the field of music. We need to strengthen the basis through the systematization of the knowledge of the elders, which is what we're doing, but also education, so that our young can actually receive that formal knowledge and make sure that young people in their regions, with everything that they have, everything that is so specific to them, their fruit, their food, their culture, can, still be part of their everyday life, but with the formal knowledge. This is exactly what is happening in Cuba, which is why this music is so tasteful, because these are people who have not lost their identity and their connections to their roots. Because, you go to the Petronio Alvarez Pacific Music Festival, and the traditional categories of marimba, chirimía, and the violin from Cauca are really doing really well. But in the category that is free form, then, there is perhaps no clarity and quality because there is a lack of training. So I wanted to tell you about my personal experience because my own experience shows it. I was the student of Gualajo. Gualajo, I would be nothing without him, and without Gualajo there wouldn't be Bahia, the band that I built. But I would not be I wouldn't be able to do much if I had not also been taught in formal music schools around the region and the world. And clearly I recognize the importance of this contribution. So let us not lose our identity and our roots, the knowledge of our elders and everything that they can teach us in terms of music. Let us make sure that they all have what they need, but also the technical development of the talent of those young people. There is so much talent out there. This African heritage that we have, this spirituality, this taste that can be felt in our music and felt also in the food that we cook, in South America, it's in the region of Esmeraldas on the Pacific coast of Ecuador that the black South American Pacific music was born. It was initially called Bambuco. It was a region that was only populated by freed slaves, and there was no Spanish influence there. And so the basis of the African influence in music in South America was really born there. This is where the marimba was first forged, and then it grew through Colombia. The bambuco is often known as Andean music, but actually the root of the bambuco was created in what was called the Sambo Kingdom. And in Africa there is a region called Bambouk, and this is where this comes from. This is our heritage, this is our root. And so, step by step, we have to really safeguard this memory, but make sure it's completed by formal education. Thank you very much. Moderator. Thank you very much, Professor. Clearly, a very crystal clear invitation for us to strengthen formal musical education. I was given a small paper telling me that we have unfortunately little time left for the panel, so let us give the floor to the other panelists who have not spoken yet, so that we may hear them. Thank you very much. My name is Maisel. I am an artist from the Pacifican Power and La Calle Manigua, winners of the Petronio Alvarez. I wanted to really underline the importance of some of the things that Master Candelario said. We must keep in touch with our masters. You know, I am the living proof of the fact that learning from tradition is fundamental, but the urban environment is also a fundamental source of inspiration without forgetting where we come from. So I think that we should make sure that young people have access to traditional music. In my case, it was a huge source of influence, but even though I'm clearly an urban musician, I've really been influenced by urban music in its blend with traditional influence, you know. I discuss that often with Nidia Góngora, and clearly there are specific ways of singing, of playing, a way in which we express ourselves that makes us so specific. And perhaps there should be, you know, just greater knowledge of our traditional music, because several of us, those who actually have made it to a little more dissemination of our art, have been really influenced by our traditional music, Alexis Play and other artists. And this is really something that attracts young people, I think, because, you know, black music connects easily. If I am right now playing a blues solo, I can easily, you know, transition to a bambuco or a Pacific music solo, because they're musics that are really closely connected. So there should be more follow-up on most of these young people who are increasingly creating, but we must keep an eye on them, you know. The thing is, there is a lot of talent in our villages, but they must be just given the opportunity to really play and be heard. Thank you. Let us perhaps give the floor to Alfonso. Gracias. Seré muy breve.
When we think about arts and culture, we have to define and assign cultural value to arts and culture, and we also have to assign economic value to it as well. How many times have you heard a song that reminds you of traditional music? Something in the song reminds you of traditional music, but that traditional artist is not being paid. That traditional artist is not being amplified. That traditional artist is not on YouTube. So as we think about assigning value to arts and culture, art, music, dance, photography, design, architecture, food, fashion, we have traditional values, and those values extend through arts and culture, but we have to remember that it's important to assign economic value to them as well. Because there are other people outside of Colombia who are looking at your culture and assigning economic value to it, and those dollars are not coming back to Colombia. So we have to think about how we create an ecosystem where we support traditional artists. Those traditional artists are assigned economic value for their products, and they can decide to extend their products to others. But what we shouldn't do is just simply assign cultural value to our art. We should assign economic value as well, and decide how to amplify that value so that it benefits all of Colombia.
Gracias.
Thank you very much, Alfonso, for those words. Indeed, an economic value to arts and culture is fundamental, and many artists are really left behind. They're producing art, they're trying to circulate their art, but this economic value doesn't come back to Colombia. So this is probably also an invitation for public institutions to identify how those spaces and those platforms can be promoted so that music indeed safeguards its economic value and make sure that artists are just not forgotten and living in the precarious situations that our artists experience in Colombia. So this is indeed a challenge for all of us, and we must look into it. And let us now give the floor to Kim Haas, who will also reply to this question regarding how cultural industries can be an engine for economic sustainability for our people of African descent and for our artists.
And I think we have a show called, a travel show on public television in the United States, and it's called Afro-Latino Travels with Kim Haas. And the series is about celebrating the incredible power, beauty, talent, ingenuity of people of African descent in Latin America. And I came up with the idea for the show because I was tired, frankly, of watching Telemundo and Univision and not seeing anybody who looked like any of us, and traveling throughout Latin America, like Colombia and Puerto Rico and Brazil, and meeting all these incredible artists and singers and performers and home cooks. And so I decided to create the show myself. I wasn't going to wait for someone else to show the beauty of our people, and so I decided to create that program. And so I say all that to say that I'm so proud because of it. We shot in Colombia, so we shot 2 episodes in Cali and the Pacific Coast. And one of the episodes we featured Jose Castillo. I don't know if you all know the artist Jose Castillo, but he painted a beautiful portrait of the Vice President, and we showed that in a segment. As a result of that segment, we had viewers, African American viewers in Florida, who reached out to me and said, "Who is that painter? We love his work and we want to buy his work." And so I was so honored that because of that, we were able to give Jose and help give him visibility, which he deserved, and then connect him with folks who were African Americans who were ready to buy his paintings and buy them at cost. And they were looking for, talking about a discount or anything, and buy multiple paintings. But that's the power, remember, of ownership, because I own my show, so I can decide who's going to be on there, who's in front of the camera and behind the camera. And then also now having a tour. So we'll be back here in 2 months, so I hope to see you all. And one of the things, gracias, and I'll make it real quick. One of the things that is really important to me is that making sure that as many as our vendors as possible that we work with are Afro-Colombian. So when we go to Cartagena, we're working with Alex Roca of Experience Rio Cartagena, and that our guides here in Cali are Afro-Colombian, and that hopefully, I don't know where Nidia is that we can have a meal at Nidia's restaurant and make sure that we are spending our dollars with artists like Nidia and like Jose and all the wonderful Afro-Colombians, because it is of the utmost importance. Gracias.
Ay, muchas gracias. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so very much, Kim. I think that you're really reminding us of several important elements. One of the things that we were discussing is how to promote arts, the arts of our people, but also a challenge that our states and public institutions must take on, which is how can we help support those autonomy building programs, and I of course include in that the fact that programs such as yours, shows such as yours, can actually showcase some of the things that we do here, and this is clearly a wonderful encouragement so that we may continue in the right direction. And I will now give the floor to David Romuald with the same question. Thank you.
For me to be here. My name is David Romuald Bellegarde Smeralda. Most people call me DR. I'm the founder of Moncon Group, which is a global media tech company focusing on Afro culture. So we've got 6 pillars: music, film, sport, art, fashion, and dance. We've been privileged to buy the license of the famous magazine Rolling Stone and bring it to Africa. So as I'm sure most of you know, Africa is 54 countries. There's about 4 main languages being spoken every day: English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. And for us, from the very beginning, it was very important to make our content available to as many people as possible. So the website is available in 20 languages. And from the beginning, we had that vision to create that bridge with the diaspora. So we've got a diaspora of 350 million people. Colombia is a great example. 30% of the population here is of Afro descent. And we wanted to connect with that population, not just in Europe or in the US, but also in South America. And today is a privilege for me to be here, and I thank our esteemed Vice President for inviting us, and Gwen Madiba as well for plugging us with this event. In terms of what we see for the future, I think it's fair to say there was a gap in the market that we recognize. We've got the talent, so that's never been the issue, but we don't have enough media support to amplify the work that our talent are doing. And I'm great my colleague here have been able to highlight some success, being able to showcase an artist through a show, and the ending being the sale of that painting is amazing. And I think there's so many stories like this one that we can create with our platform. So what we're looking to do in the coming month is to bring some key events to Colombia. With Rolling Stone Africa, we've been able to partner with Afro Nation, which is the biggest Afro music show, at least in Europe. That's 60,000 people coming to Portugal every year. And with the biggest acts from Burna Boy to Davido to Thames and so forth. And of course, we would love to bring some Afro-Colombian talent to this festival, and also bring a similar festival to Colombia.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Mr. David. I believe what we're talking about, what you mentioned about coming together and create processes to unite Afro-descending people is truly important for us. And being able to project a festival and who would attend the festival and be present there. I want to deeply thank Madam Vice President for creating these events that help us to connect Colombia and the world, our Black peoples, our Afro-descending peoples, who are fundamental in building racial justice, cultural justice, and economic justice. Because you can't have cultural justice if you don't foster economic justice. So, thank you all for sharing your experiences. This is the start and part of the talks that will continue so we can get to specific and real things in this field of culture, arts, and knowledge. Thank you so much.
Que nos tomemos una foto, dice aquí, dicen los artistas. ¿Será que nos tomamos la foto abajo? Ah, sí, yo creo que sí.
Brindémosle un fuerte aplauso a quienes han integrado este panel que nos brindó diferentes perspectivas.
Let's give a round of applause for our panelists who provided different perspectives around the importance of cultural industries as an engine for the development of communities and people of African descent. So I continue to write down the most important things and tell you about them so you can take them into consideration. This panel went deeply into the importance of identifying the market, but also being prepared, which requires us to be educated in different dimensions. It's really important to identify our common values because that enables us to dialogue with the diaspora all over the world, but also identifying our internal processes. Rescuing tradition is part of the elements that contribute to attaining cultural justice. Let's continue with all the knowledge that's being shared today. It's really important when you are able to have visionary processes such as the one the Vice President has had, when you're able to create paths, overcome language barriers, and sit different actors to dialogue about different knowledge, you can start building new perspectives. But it's important to move from speech into action so we can start having tangible results in this first version of the Economic Justice Summit for Communities and People of African Descent. One of the main objectives for this forum that seeks to advance economic justice for communities and people and persons of African descent is promoting inclusion of the African diaspora. So our hosts from the Baobab Innovation Center and our ally, the Global Black Economic Forum, have decided to sign a letter of intent aimed at improving economic justice for Afro-Colombian, Black, Palenquero, and Raizal peoples in Colombia through the exchange of experiences and knowledge in order to transfer good practices. So before signing this letter of intent from Maria Jane Mina Patiño, representing Baobab Center, and Alfonso David, President and CEO of the Global Black Economic Forum, I would like to invite Madam Vice President of the Republic of Colombia, Francia Elena Marquez Mina, who would like to share some words with you.
¿Cómo estamos?
How are you guys? I see that the community is a little dispersed while the room is a little empty, so please, if you came to follow this important event, please join us in the room. Thank you very much. I believe that we have a historic opportunity and we must make the most out of it. And all those of you who came interested in discovering how we can work together to build economies from our roots and our identity. How do we build strategies and opportunities? Well, I think it's an important space. We have to make the most out of it. So please join us here in the auditorium so that we may all learn. Because being an entrepreneur is also about learning from those who have paved the way before us. So please join us. Thank you very much. I think we've heard two very important panels. The first one reflecting on investment and entrepreneurship, and the second one about cultural industries. I really wanted them to stay on stage and, keep teaching us things and keep suggesting ways for us to work together further. And I would like to greet the President and CEO of the Global Black Economic Forum, Alfonso David. Thank you so much for being here once again, dear Alfonso. Thank you so much for all your insightful contributions. Thank you for accepting our invitation, for coming here to Colombia so that we may build pathways towards economic justice for our people. Let me greet the legal representative of the Baobab Innovation Center on Ethnic, Racial, Gender and Environmental Justice, Maria Jane Mina Patiño. And let me talk about this place where we are now. We are in the south of the city of Cali. The only black people that came here were black women who came here to Barrio El Jardín to clean the homes of the families who live in this neighborhood. This is a very privileged area in the city of Cali. And it has been traditionally an area that is closed to people like us, Ciudad Jardín. This house was known as Casa Chalo. It used to be owned by a drug trafficker, and it was seized by the Colombian state. It used to be a house that was at the service of drug trafficking. It was in the hands of the department of the Colombian state that manages forfeited assets. And it was transferred initially to Lila Mujer. Lila Mujer is an organization made of women with HIV, led by Mrs. Janet Valencia. And jointly to Baobab. So those two organizations started working together. When I came here for the first time, I think several of you will remember the first time we came, this was all broken. All the walls were crumbling down because intruders had come here seeking perhaps hidden money left by the drug traffickers. But thanks to the help of the Ford Foundation, who gave us their support, this space was refurbished for the well-being of the Afro-Colombian, Raizal and Palenquera communities. And I hope that you will all use this space. I hope artists will also use this space. I hope that this is a place where we may produce together and generate this platform that we are putting together. We rarely talk about economies, and sometimes we feel a little bit ashamed because we were always taught to talk about these things with a hint of shame. But what we are talking about here is about our right to produce, to grow economically. And as it was said here, this implies overcoming many barriers. And Alfonso this morning was telling us that 2% of the United States procurement budget is the small percentage that is actually going to black businesses. And same thing happens here. The state is very afraid of signing contracts with black companies. And I've done everything I can to break this hurdle, and I have to say that even within the office of the Vice President, just buying the lunches that you were served, which were prepared by Afro-Colombian women, it was such a difficult process so that they would fulfill the requirements of this public contract, which are often raised as barriers, really. And so the whole budget that is spent in Colombia on public procurement is considerable. And the situation is so bad that we don't even know how many black businesses actually get a portion of this money. So state procurement, the state being one of the main companies, so to speak, in terms of money actually spent in Colombia, well, they must clearly take this into account, you know. Rosario Lozano has provided mental health services to the state through her clinic. She is a black woman, but when the state owes her money for her services, she knows how difficult it is to actually get paid, because there are still many inefficiencies and many difficulties, and this is why we are here today. What do we hope? Well, for a platform to be created so that industries in the economy of black people can be created. In the cultural industry, you know, many of our artists sometimes come to me and ask, Vice President, can you help me with one concert, just one concert? But, you know, this takes more than just one concert. It's a whole platform to really support artists. And we see how really well-recognized artists in the country win Grammys all the time, but our Afro artists rarely do. So we still have a lot of work, which is why we wanted to bring those entrepreneurs and organizations here so that we may reflect together on this objective, which is the economic justice of people of African descent in this country. So I'd like to thank all those of you who came here, all those of you who have shared their knowledge in those spaces. You know, sharing your knowledge here should also be paid. I should be paying all of you for all the knowledge that you come here and share, you know. This is highly valuable knowledge, but right now we're just in a spirit of solidarity, starting from scratch with little budgets. So I'd like to thank you all for sharing your knowledge, and more companies should be created. I'm thinking of, you know, all this setup here. For this kind of setup, it's only very rarely that black businesses can be hired to build those tents and put those lights and those speakers and those microphones. But each and every little purchase that we do must be put in perspective of economic justice. Therefore, we must be prepared to provide those services. And as Luc was saying earlier in the first panel this afternoon, it's not so much about the money, it's really about being ready for business. So what I would like those 2 days to produce as a platform of entrepreneurs, men and women with dreams who want to become entrepreneurs but also take advantage of those platforms that have been created by other people in the United States, in Canada. We have a delegation from South Africa who we would like to greet. Welcome to Colombia, of course. So I'd like to thank you all. We will continue tomorrow. I don't want anybody to miss those dialogues because I know this will be useful for you, for your initiatives, for your company, men, women, in all our diversity. We have a great opportunity of coming together because individually we won't go very far, but together we will. It's going to be a hard path, full of hurdles, but let us go together. And with that, once again, welcome. We will now sign a letter of intent between the Global Black Economic Forum and this center, Baobab, so that we may together keep pushing for the economic strengthening and development of people of African descent in Colombia. Thank you very much, Madam Director of the RAD Pacifico, of the Chamber of Commerce of Cali, who is here with us, the Secretary of Culture of the City of Cali, because we will need your support for the future. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, señora vice.
Thank you so much, Madam Vice President. You will be the witness of honor for the signing of this letter, this agreement of intent that expresses the shared interest of the Global Black Economic Forum and the Center for Innovation and Justice, Baobab, to improve economic justice of societies and people of African descent in our country. By signing this letter of intent, a strategic alliance consolidates aimed at international cooperation and Afro-descending leadership in Colombia and in the diaspora. We want to thank you all for being here in such a meaningful moment because all of the initiatives here reinforce the commitment of taking new steps towards economic justice for Afro-descendant societies and people. We would like to especially thank Madam Vice President of the Republic, Francia Elena Marcos Mina, who's the witness of honor of this event that will be immortalized for history.
Es entonces un compromiso.
This is a collaboration commitment, the first grand result that we get from this first version of the summit, Advancing Economic Justice of Societies and People of African Descent, celebrated here in Cali within the 21st of May 174 years after abolishing slavery in our country, and we are gathered here together as black, Afro-descending, Raizal and Palenquero people ready to lead the historical responsibility we have to create new alliances for economic justice to become a reality for all of us.
Vamos ahora a dar paso a nuestro.
We'll move on to our next panel. We have had the opportunity to go through the history of important processes such as the Global Afro-Descendant Economic Forum. We've had the opportunity to hear about the experience of business people who have great companies. What should we or shouldn't we do? It's time to recognize local processes, how the businessmen and women in Colombia are planning their strategies, what are the opportunities for our communities, and how companies with millions in sales every year are being consolidated. So let's talk in our panel called Economic Justice and Sustainability for Entrepreneurships and Companies of Afro-descending origin. I would like to call the manager of Rap Pacific, also Noemi Arboleda, founder of Noemi Arboleda Cosmetics and vice president of the Afro Chamber of Entrepreneurship and Trade, ANECAF. This is like a TikTok trend. If you haven't raised the first two fingers, you're in debt. You have to buy from local business owners. I would like to welcome Melissa Martinez, businesswoman from the Valle Pacifico restaurant. Also Samir Caicedo Rivas, creator and manager of the brand Básico Pero Nítido. And also Andres Luna, the founder of Astronea, Jolly Joker, and NBO, technology developer for the health sector with the company Consensus. He will have the important role to lead the conversation. That will be Daniela Valencia, Aragon advisor for the Free Productive Woman Fund of the Vice Presidency of the Republic. Welcome, you have the floor.
Bueno, muy buenas tardes para todas las personas que nos.
Thank you all who are with us. Now we have the challenge of having a quick but powerful talk. I would like to start by asking you, who hasn't felt economic injustice at some point in their lives, at home, with your grandmothers, with your mothers, with your parents? Have you ever felt like you're suffering economic injustice? No one has? Who hasn't? And who has? It's a feeling that oftentimes connects us. That's why we will talk about the opposite. The need for economic justice, particularly for entrepreneurs and businessmen and businesswomen of African descent. Talking about economic justice for them is not just a conversation that's important, but that is urgent to talk about it. It's not something we are dreaming, but something that's also possible. As you saw, 4 business people joined us and an institution that works to bridge the gaps that we have regarding this topic. So I would like to start by asking them, which strategies from your experience, from each one of from the sectors you work on and the companies you have built, what are the strategies required to guarantee economic justice to Afro-descending business people against the unfair competition you sometimes face against big brands? But how can we build our business models or knowledge in the sectors you're part of? Gastronomy, fashion, technology. How can we protect our knowledge? This has been a conversation that has been going on all day long, and we can close on it and share from your experiences. So I would like to start with Noemi Arboleda, founder of Noemi Arboleda Cosmetics and vice president of ANICAF. How do you believe we can work on this? Hi, is this working? Hi, good afternoon. I believe first we must ask ourselves several things. First, we have the right to compete and to grow, because we don't come from inheritance. Our companies were not inherited to us. We have had to start from scratch. We have had to earn our companies step by step. Along with my husband, we started our entrepreneurship out of an necessity. In my case, there was no makeup for black women here in Colombia. I competed in a beauty pageant. I earned 7 crowns in Colombia and 2 international crowns, but I would go into the pageant and I would get white women makeup, so I always looked like a mime. So it was out of necessity that I had to start my company, but I didn't have millions. I had to start from the bottom, climb, go there, come here, and fight my way through it. So thank God I have been able to consolidate my black women makeup brand. Also, we don't have platforms to which we can bring our products. We have nowhere to put them. We have no investment. Historically, we are not attractive for banks, for the financial system in Colombia. I was talking to a jeweler, handcrafted jeweler. He told me I went to the bank and what they proposed was that they could lend me 3 million pesos. But that ring that you see right there costs 3 million. So when a black business person goes to the bank, gets into debt. So I believe economic justice has to do with looking at us differently, creating platforms for us, having special resources for us, not have anything given to us for free, but that they see us as special cases. Thank you, Noemi, for talking about the need to have differentiated credits for Afro-descending population. I would like to share that in Latin America, 80% of entrepreneurs are women, but 48% of women-led businesses create income under one minimum wage. And that's part of the challenges for business sustainability led by Afro-descending people, particularly women. 59% of these entrepreneurships are the only source of income for their families. So supporting sustainability for Afro-descending businesses is supporting development and lives of black families in Latin America, particularly in Colombia. I would like to give the floor to Melissa Marines, who's a businesswoman from the Valle del Pacifico restaurant. In your experience, how do you think we can guarantee economic justice to Afro-descending businesswomen such as yourself, particularly in the gastronomic sector? How do you preserve the knowledge in that field? My name is Melissa. Thank you. My name is Melissa Marines. I'm the founder of the restaurant Valle Pacifico and another restaurant here in Cali. Thank you for having me at this event. Something very important we heard this morning was that we came here to listen to one another, and it's time for economic justice. Nothing's more real than that. I started when I was 21 years old. I had the dream of being an entrepreneur, but had no resources. So when Luke Gerard and everyone who's talked up here that we need economic justice, we need investment, we need spaces beyond spaces, we need processes to support entrepreneurs. I'm a businesswoman because I'm also a business administrator and an empiric cook. I arrived into gastronomy chasing the dream of being a businesswoman with a passion for cooking what my grandmothers, my aunts, my mother had taught me, and also recognizing that Cali, being one of the main cities and the main one in the Colombian Pacific, and the so-called Pacific cuisine restaurants in Cali were not led by black people or by women. So I started my entrepreneurship project based upon my knowledge, my ancestry, and in Cali we can create businesses, we can create gastronomy businesses, but we must do it too, because something that's been mentioned is that we have been displaced from certain spaces. When you go to Pacific restaurants in the city, you find black women, but you usually find them in the kitchens, but they're not leading processes. So I would like to invite you all to, I as a businesswoman, what can I do to start changing that script? And something very specific I see is that we need economic power. Economic power must flow among us, must be among one another. So I currently have decision-making power because my companies, fortunately, we have 25 people working for us approximately, and I decide who can get that economic power. So I would like to invite you all of us who can be in decision-making positions, can prioritize who will get that economic power from spaces that belong to us, and those people must be black. The vice president went ahead of me because I also knew this place when it was just handed for use, and Esther, who I love and to whom I thank for all the opportunities. The first time I catered a vice presidency event was when Dr. Francia Marquez was vice president, not before, because we had no access to these spaces. So we can't let ourselves be taken out of spaces that belong to us. That's why what Dr. Francia was saying is so real. All the contracts, everything that happens in the spaces that belong to us must belong to us. They must be given to us. So I had a really fast speech, but I have to summarize it a bit, because basically what I think we should do is, I'm a product of an entrepreneurship project, of a country project, Emprender Fund, that gave me resources. It's not a project that's focused on Afro population, because they work with all sorts of entrepreneurs, but support and incubation for projects is so important. I was telling Juan Guillermo, who's somewhere around here, he's been the only chief at the Chamber of Commerce of Cali who's black, that we need incubation projects, and it's been repeated all day long because I'm part of an incubation project that's not black, but it's an incubation project that bets on the country. So beyond providing resources, which we obviously need, we need money to grow our companies or businesses, but we need bets that come from policy that allow us to achieve something as basic as being able to have contracts with public institutions. And I would like to close by saying that the development of Afro-descending power in Colombia is not just an act of justice, but a fundamental strategy for the prosperity of all our nation. Only when Afro-Colombian communities have the same opportunities as the rest of the country, we can really talk about economic inclusion. Only when Afro-Colombian people are not taken out of their spaces and get economic retribution for their knowledge will we be able to talk about economic justice. Thank you so much. Thank you, Melissa. I believe that all of us from Cali, all of us who live in Cali, are really proud of visiting a Pacific food restaurant led by a black woman, unlike what we had before. So congratulations also for setting the pace in this market, but also having the highest quality a restaurant can have. I would like to continue the conversation with Andres Luna. You develop technology infrastructure, and this has been a really interesting conversation because it invites people in different sectors to think about economic justice for Afro-descending people. How have you seen this from your sector, and what are the strategies you believe can contribute to this big purpose that brings us upon here today? Okay, first of all, as a child, I started working on technology with my brother, and the industry of technology is highly competitive. I'm lucky enough to be part of the 1% of world black population that can access venture capital, and that's what enables and accelerates transformation processes and the processes of building this type of companies that compete in truly hard fields dominated by some economic groups. I think us Afro-descending communities and people have to be included in the conversation of emerging important technologies, because that's how economic groups are created that end up controlling people and marginalizing people and taking us to where we are right now, struggling to be able to drive and recognize ourselves and the capabilities we have. I believe if we search online what a power force is, when you look at your cell phone, artificial intelligence, blockchain, if we are involved in building that power, we will have a voice. We will show up as part of the history we're building ourselves. This has been a process of many years to present venture capital projects, and we have had to present our projects to gather capital in every possible way. I've been through the Shark Tank. I've been through every imaginable way to raise capital until finally being able to have a competitive company. Today we build decentralized infrastructure for health, which is something that's technical, that might seem irrelevant, but it's ultimately, when people understand that it's the power of people, the power of connecting with our own data, with our own information, it's a fight that's worth fighting. So I believe in technology there's plenty of field, plenty of resources, and plenty of restrictions also to access those resources. I believe there's a call today for 5,000 million pesos for artificial intelligence, for which you need 1 doctorate and 2 master's degrees. So let's see how many black people have those titles, and at least in the context where I am, there are very few of us that meet those requirements. So there are industries that for Afro-descending people we have managed to dominate, to understand that we have fought and we are sustaining ourselves there, but this is a really tiny part, but that dominates the world today, because the most important companies in the world, the most important economic groups in the world are tech companies, and we are not on that list. We don't show up on that list, and it will require us to truly commit to creating companies from our villages, from our cities, so we can have internet access. It's much easier to have education at a large scale It's easier to create genomic processes at a great scale if people at least have internet at home. If people have internet on their mobile phones. So in order to get there, we will have to continue fighting and raising our voice, understanding that black people can build technology, that black people can compete in the tech sector, that we can win those TV shows that only show heroes. We can be those heroes. We can get capital, and I am evidence that this can be done, and that ultimately what's important is having a functional business model that creates capital and economic power so we can use that strength and bring it to our people. That's what I do from the bottom of my heart. I love to develop projects in the Pacific. I love to develop projects in Colombia because it's, in my opinion, the region with which I connect, the one that represents me. And it's a bit easier to get capital elsewhere in the world, and this is all the talent that's escaping. Most of my capital comes from foreign capital, not from black-led investment funds, because also many people like ourselves have the talent, but we're also talking about millions of people competing for these very few resources. So accessing those resources means being aligned, understanding that we need to meet the requirements in order to access resources. And we also need to have visibility so people believe that there's people who can also compete and be successful in these industries. Thank you.
Muy importante.
Thank you so much, Andres. You're mentioning something very important. Accessing power, but also building a different power that enables dignity for Afro-descending people with historical reparation perspectives. Afro-descendants in Colombia and Latin America and the world have historically worked on this, and I believe that perspective of economic justice you provide is necessary, but there's also a big opportunity with Afro-descending children in Colombia. So technology is something that's closer to us with big opportunities because it's oftentimes portrayed as something distant. So we also have challenges in terms of education, and your youth leadership can also let young generations know that they can be represented and that these spaces belong to us as well. I would like to give the floor now to Shamir, who's the leader and the businessman from Básico Pero Nítido, an Afro-descending fashion brand that invites us to rethink Afro-descending people. Within your field, what do you feel are the required strategies to guarantee economic justice for business people as yourself who have faced unfair competition against big brands, locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally? But also, how can we protect our creations in fields such as the one you work in? Let's start with one part of that question. Good afternoon, thank you for having me. I would like to add something to the answer from my brother, which is that before having internet, you need to have power, water, roads. We must bring some basic resources that are needed in our villages, in our territories, so we can have the internet and have it continuously, not with 5 day breaks as it happens at Quibdó. So I believe in order to have economic justice, there's something you need to understand before. I wrote an answer on it from different perspectives because I feel the question is too large to answer it just like that. But I believe the debate on economic justice is not technical, but it's human. It has to do with humanity. And we understand this from the economy, from taxes, from the social aspect, from the race aspect, and from the cultural aspect as well. Each one of these develops who you are and how you understand yourself as a human being in order to develop strategies, right? So if you speak from economy, you must recognize that the value chain of what I produce is not made for me to be on top, right? Economy won't allow. I mean, we're creating innovation and we're creating a bunch of things, but we don't really have access to this being ours because anyone can come, take it, transform it, and turn it into something of their own. So we're not seeing that economic retribution. If we speak from the taxes perspective, we're trying to create companies, but we are being charged on many things that won't allow us to develop. If we're trying to create something, but anything we earn, we have to give it back in taxes, they will take the 4 by 1,000 tax here, 19% of something. So we also need tax policies that enable economic justice. So what we get can be a retribution for us. Socially, it's important to understand that support networks are not measured by numbers because they're not a system that's only economic. We're creating companies, but the companies we create are not created for just one person who's creating it. We have to feed our families with what we're creating. And if we're creating something that's hard to sustain over time, then our children or grandchildren won't be able to continue with that. So we believe economic justice has to do with the social aspect as well. And speaking about race would be redundant because you know that the structural system is racist. It's caused all of this to happen for over decades and centuries. It's caused us to not be able to develop ourselves. Racism has been created through many tools that have enabled some people in this society to develop and grow and increase their value, going against others who are every time poorer, not just physically but mentally. So this lack of equilibrium will never allow economic justice, because if you live in Quibdó and you want to ship something to Bogota but it takes 3 weeks for it to get to Bogota, your customer will never ask you for anything else again. So if someone has a company in Quibdó or even farther in, if we talk about Ismina or Guapi or even more remote villages, how can someone develop something from there? So it's really complicated. I think, speaking from fashion, we work in one of the systems that produces the most money. It's a multi-millionaire industry, and inequalities are complex because I haven't been able to launch a collection I've had for 2 months because I haven't been able to produce it. But I see how other designers have already come out with 3 collections over the year. So I'm thinking I would like to do that. It's not bad that he can do it and I can't, but I would also like to launch 3 collections between December and June. So being able to not just develop those ideas but putting them into action, because us Browns conceptualize a lot, create a lot, read, study. Let's have a t-shirt that says Black history does not start with slavery, but human being hasn't understood what happened over that time and why slavery happened. So it's hard when you're working on something and the other person only wants to buy something with a bunch of colors and that's it. And it's really crazy also that you do something and you have so many processes and they tell you, no, your thing is really cool, it's really powerful, but when it comes to deciding between the one who does something colorful and someone who does what I do, they go for the one with the colors because they have lots of likes, and I'm a long-haired teacher who's just arguing all day long. So it's also important to consider the importance of the processes that are going on and see who is going through those processes. Maestro Hugo Candelario talked about something really important: processes, schools, and the legacy for future generations to continue producing, building. I think I summarized what I came up with in terms of an answer. I wanted to read it, the entire thing. This is an essay that we can publish, but I feel this is my perspective as an Afro-descending man from the Colombian Pacific, raised between Buenaventura, Bahia, Solano, Quibdó, and Cali, is able to understand my cosmovision, but also be clear that being a black or Afro-descending person is not there's no single way of being Afro-descending. There are many ways, so we also have to look at one another and understand one another. So we have to value ourselves, recognize ourselves, and accept ourselves. I feel everyone who's here today, I don't know, maybe I couldn't tell you too much about yourself, but the people who are here who know me, I strive for them to feel what I get from them, I give it back to them. Support what they do so they support what we do. Remember that black is a collective construction, and this is what will make us successful as a community. Thank you so much. Thank you, Shamir, for bringing something into this conversation which is fundamental: structural conditions in which black business people create their companies and how they must be catered from public policies, and recognize that this is also part of the unfair competition that we're mentioning in this panel in order to access economic justice. Businessmen and women have mentioned different strategies, but also different institutions have worked on tackling these challenges that we see in each department of the Pacific region, and also generally in the whole country. So we have Viviana Obando, manager of RAP Pacifico, which is in charge of working on implementing programs that respond to this. What strategies have you used that have been successful to promote economic justice for Afro-descending people of the Pacific?
En primer lugar,
the interpreters would like to ask whether anyone is listening to the English interpretation. Could you please raise your hand if you're listening to the English channel right now? May you please raise your hand if you're listening to the English interpretation at this stage. Seeing no one, the booth will stop interpreting into English and will only interpret into Spanish. Thank you very much.
intenté, incluso hice mis estudios, hice una especialización en gerencia de negocios y mi tesis fue crear ese proyecto. Entonces lo fui desarrollando mientras estudié y posteriormente a ello. Entonces, cuando las escucho, también me sumo a muchos de los planteamientos que ustedes, las personas que están aquí me han compartido, y que de alguna manera han alimentado las apuestas o las propuestas que estamos haciendo desde la institución que hoy gerencio, que es la RAP, que es la sumatoria de los 4 departamentos, Chocó, Valle, Cauca y Nariño, para impulsar el desarrollo integral de toda la región. En el caso específico, y como lo estaba comentando el caballero que me antecedió, no hay una sola respuesta frente al tema de justicia económica, porque la situación requiere de unas soluciones integrales. Entonces no podríamos decir que solo trabajando con un tema vamos a resolver unos temas estructurales que hay en las poblaciones o en los territorios donde hay más población de comunidad negra y afrocolombiana. Lo que sí estamos haciendo es avanzando en comprender esto y desde esa lógica estamos haciendo unas apuestas que muchas son disruptivas y muchas son muy ambiciosas y la primera muy ambiciosa es procurar la autonomía regional. O sea, si nosotros no tenemos desde el concepto de región, Colombia se ha reconocido como un país de regiones y para poder generar un desarrollo regional necesitamos tener esa independencia hacia dónde orientar los recursos, no tener esa dependencia al nivel central, y por eso creemos que el tema de la autonomía regional es, digamos, el fin último al cual debemos apostar para poder desarrollar distintos temas que favorezcan a las comunidades. Lo segundo es que nosotros estamos convencidos de las grandes potencialidades que tiene la región del Pacífico y estamos haciendo unas apuestas que le hemos llamado las 4B. O sea, cómo integramos la biodiversidad, la biotecnología, la bioeconomía y la bioseguridad. O sea, nosotros tenemos que pararnos sobre esas potencialidades que tiene la región para poder mover al desarrollo que se esté adelantando en el territorio. Pero esa es una apuesta que es una apuesta de largo alcance. O sea, no podemos decir que mañana o que en un año vamos a lograrlo, sino que tenemos que ir avanzando, y aquí está nuestra exministra Mabel, que incluso hizo todas las experiencias de tener negocios, de hacer apuestas en el Chocó, y sabe de qué estoy hablando, de que hay que hacer un camino y que hay que dar los pasos a sabiendas de que podemos fracasar unos, pero que los que nos sigan van a aprender de esos fracasos y que van a avanzar. Y la tercera, digamos, estrategia que nosotros estamos desarrollando o que queremos impulsar, porque cuando estoy hablando, no estoy hablando de que ya están hechas, sino que estamos trabajando en esa dirección, es que necesitamos crear un ecosistema que favorezca a los emprendimientos. Y eso lo digo desde la experiencia que tuve de haber tenido, repito, negocios. No hay un ecosistema que nos favorezca y que acoja a los emprendedores. Por eso estamos apostando a 3 temas. Primero, tener una marca Pacífico. Nosotros ya tenemos una marca Pacífico Colombia que está registrada y que, si bien está creada para el tema de turismo, creemos que tiene que ampliarse a todos los otros componentes del desarrollo para que sea una sola marca que la podemos posicionar y a través de ella todos quepamos en esa apuesta. Creemos que tenemos que apostarle a convertir o a tener una empresa certificadora de calidad que pueda, desde esa lógica, entrar a los mercados nacionales e internacionales. Yo creo que estamos haciendo una carrera, perdone que les diga, de locos queriendo ir solos a lograr entrar a mercados. Yo creo que hay algunos campos en los cuales es mejor crear esas condiciones para que se pueda avanzar en esa dirección. Lo otro es que nosotros ya tenemos una tienda Pacífico Colombia, pero queremos que esa tienda Pacífico Colombia se vuelva una tienda a través del comercio de las redes, o sea, que no sea una tienda solo física, sino el e-commerce podemos desarrollarlo para que todos los productos que se generan en el Pacífico encuentren un espacio en donde se pueda comercializar y en donde podamos preparar esos productos de mejor manera, o sea, hacer un entrenamiento y un acompañamiento para poder desarrollar esos productos. Y también creemos en la asociatividad y en la alianza con redes nacionales e internacionales. Creemos que tenemos que impulsar la asociatividad, por eso estamos apostando a la plataforma de emprendimiento del Pacífico con las 5 cámaras del Pacífico, en donde también el gobierno nacional se ha vinculado, y creemos que esos son los espacios que tenemos que potencializar para poder entrenarnos y prepararnos para apostar al desarrollo de las comunidades. Y hay 2 temas muy importantes: la convergencia regional, que es un tema que lo lidera el gobierno nacional. Nosotros estamos impulsando que en el Pacífico sea el motor de la convergencia regional en los temas relacionados con el desarrollo económico. Entonces, convergencia.
The interpretation will resume for people following us online. So, we have several topics that we have identified, and this is what we would like to foster. And then the Pacific must be organized in a way that identifies what we can produce, what is useful to produce for the department based on our capabilities in terms of environment, biotechnology, biodiversity, biosecurity, and bioeconomy. This is what we are trying to foster through a partnership with the private sector. We are signing memorandums of understanding with different ministries, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, among others, and we are working with the Office of the Vice President of the Republic, leading the conditions or the establishment of the conditions that will allow you all to foster entrepreneurship, because I've always said as an entrepreneur that you will not get far on your own. We have to work together. Thank you very much, Bibiana. I think this has been an interesting conversation because what you all did was opening our views and sharing perspectives on strategies that can be useful to achieve something that is really necessary and urgent, which is economic justice for people of African descent in this country, and in particular for the entrepreneurs in Colombia. You mentioned things that I will briefly sum up. So structural conditions deal with poverty, barriers in education, and the challenges in terms of connectivity that the region still faces. Then permanent construction about what we are in this country, the diversity of people in Colombia and Afro-descendants, the diversity then of regional strengths, the need to strengthen different sectors in order to build joint pathways towards economic justice, the need for differentiated funding and access to public contracting, and ancestral knowledge that must be valued, especially as we build up more technological capabilities. And instead of closing this conversation, I just want to further open it, because this is a conversation that really is still pending and that shall continue. So you mentioned some of the policies that were that are implemented at the regional level, but I'd like to tell you that the Office of the Vice President has implemented a program that is the Free and Productive Women's Fund, which seeks to reach 8,300 women of African descent during the current mandate of the Vice President, in order to bridge knowledge gaps, but also mobilizing assets that would allow them to become more productive. We have regional policies, but also national policies led by the Office of the Vice President, so that we may build further pathways towards economic justice for people of African descent. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. Congratulations on what you achieved with your company. I think this has been a real source of motivation and a very beautiful way to close this work. Let's see how we can keep building racial justice. It's something that we do need, and we are ready to keep supporting spaces such as this one. Thank you very much.
Sara, ¿me están pidiendo la palabra? Una pregunta. Bueno, tenemos una pregunta del público.
We have a question from the audience. My name is Rosario Lozano. I own the largest mental health institution in Colombia. I'm a black woman, but I don't have my company in Afro territory. We started in the Eastern Plains, and today I have around 700 direct employees, but 7 or 8 programs across the country. Why did I want to take the floor to tell you is because I see young people doing what I had to do back then with all the difficulties black women face to create companies. But I wanted to come and listen to you, not to lecture you. And from listening to you, I see that I am building an emotions theme park, and it would be a great honor for me to do it with you using technology. So I will give you my business card so we can sit down and talk about it, because that's how we can articulate and create greater things. When I see that you do makeup and you've done it for many years, I started thinking, what if you do makeup for people who can't see, for handicapped people who can paint themselves via braille or put their own makeup on. So this is something that hasn't been explored and that it would be interesting to go into. And when you say, I would like to launch 3 collections every year, what if you produce clothing for people with Parkinson? So this is a world that we can dive into. Stepping out of the Afro zone a bit doesn't mean you stop being black. That means looking at the whole universe so you can sell more and earn more. Thank you so much, Rosario. I believe your invitation was also mentioned by Kim in the previous panel. One of the best ways to build economic justice is supporting business people by creating alliances and buying from them. That's why we also want to invite you to visit the bazaar of Afro-Colombian identity that we have here. Follow them on social media, get their contact information so we can help them. Because we also support them by buying from them, making their brands and their companies visible, and surrounding them as we have discussed today. Thank you so much, Rosario, and thank you all for staying today in this panel regarding economic justice for entrepreneurships and Afro-descending companies.
Gracias, por supuesto, a Daniela y a los y las panelistas que hicieron parte.
Thank you to all the panelists from this really important conversation, because being able to connect and acknowledge the challenges of local production is truly important for us to take that step. As it was said by one of our panelists, Luke Gerard, broadening our companies also happens by articulating our experiences and putting them to the service of others who do things similar to our things.
De esta manera llegamos al cierre de los.
We have reached the end of the panels for the day. We will have a cultural presentation now, and we would like to bid farewell to everyone who's connected through our social media, because we're going to have time to enjoy the cultural knowledge that's present here and that has been fundamental for all the day. While the band prepares, let's listen to a poem.
Vamos a recibir la declamación de un.
Let's listen to a poem by a woman who comes from Buenaventura, Liz Candelo. I want her to introduce herself because she has like a natural smoothness. Please, a big round of applause for Liz Candelo. Good afternoon. To give closure to this wonderful event, we have several gaps here, but I will bridge them with poetry. I am Licha Candelo, the Ministry of Culture from the Embassy of Buenaventura. I was born in Viento Libre, Buenaventura, in a palafetic home. Who knows what a palafetic home is? Well, us black were born in palafetic homes because these are the homes that sit on the mangrove around the sea. That's what palafetic homes are. Houses by the sea, wooden homes.
Hay un rum rum que mis bolsillos ya no guardan nada. Mi corazón tampoco.
There's a buzz going around that my pockets hold nothing anymore, neither does my heart. There's a buzzword of a jealous sound under the lyrics that I'm dying to decipher. There's a buzzword of dry meat, cries of songs from silent languages. There's a buzzword about a lady who's called Floripa, who dies tomorrow morning and has no one to cry for her, to help her die well. Tomorrow morning, dies the lady Floripa. I don't even have someone who cries for me, who helps me die well. I beg Saint Anthony to help me die well.
Hay un run run.
There's a buzzword going around that says that this verse was written centuries ago. By black people who were liberated by me. Thank you so much. Poetry, peace and change will come from poetry, or they won't come. Madam Vice President, thank you so much. Thank you all.
Gracias.
Thank you for that poetry. I know energy is low, but now with marimba music, we will get back the energy of the day. But let's have one more moment, because this space was open with the leaders who are in the territories, those who have come to present their companies. I want us to welcome Napoleon Garcia, Director of the Afro Business People Chamber. Napoleon, thank you for being here. A big round of applause for him. Thank you so much. Thank you for this important event. Madam Vice President, congratulations for your vision of understanding that what comes for black communities is business, entrepreneurship. I live in Washington. I lead an initiative called Emerging Entrepreneurship and Diplomacy. We have one program in Colombia focusing on entrepreneurship in Afro-Colombian communities. We had a workshop here in Cali with 100 Afro-Colombian business people from all over the country.